All right, guys, what's happening? It's Halsey Schider with the Helicopter Podcast, and we are day 3. I cannot believe it. It's day 3 of the very first Verticon. I feel like every year goes by pretty quick, and this year is no different. But it's a lineup today. I'm doing 3 podcasts, and I'm excited to be starting off podcast number 1 this morning with Pete Anderson of PG&E. This is going to be a really fun conversation. Admittedly, I don't actually know a ton about PG&E as I'm asking you if it's in Oregon before, so clearly I don't know enough.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to learning more about PG&E, your flight operations, how helicopters are part of your operation, and see where the conversation goes. But if you wouldn't mind, just kick it off with a little bit of who you are, how long you've been in this industry, your role at PG&E.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Pretty humbling to even get invited, to come talk to you guys about what we're doing.
That's so cool.
Pretty excited. I'm a big podcast guy, and man, I think it's really helped me in my development, whether it's business world or aviation,
100%.
because I'm not a big book reader by fault, because I usually end up comatose and sleep. So
that's how I am.
And I travel so much too. So audiobooks, podcasts have been huge. So to actually be on the other end of the podcast is pretty humbling. So excited, especially definitely always excited to talk about, the great team we have and all the cool stuff we're doing. So I'm currently the senior manager of helicopter ops at PG&E. I've been in this role for going on 5 years. Been in the department since we started it in 2012. Before that, we didn't have a centralized operation, to manage all helicopter ops. It was real heavy in our electric transmission department, which that's where I came from. Started my career at PG&E 28 years ago.
Wow.
So, yeah, I remember being a young guy in the room way back when, and guys would spout off their seniority, and you're like, holy crap, and now
you're spouting off your seniority.
So, been a great career. I spent the first part of my career as a lineman, came up.
I was going to say, so obviously you started on the line side.
Yeah, came up on the line side, was real fortunate to work under just some outstanding crew foremen that just helped me grow up and enhance my work ethic. I think I had a pretty decent one, but it got stronger with those guys and learned the trade and learned how to do it, I think, correctly. And I always kind of drifted towards the transmission work, really enjoyed that stuff, on the higher voltages and the towers. And then, of course, a lot of that work was helicopter assisted. So, got to get in on the skid transfers and the platform work, and then was really fortunate to get onto our electric transmission bare hand crews. So working on the 500 kV energized. And
okay.
Of course, then we started, implementing helicopter work procedures into that, and was kind of on the ground floor of that with a great team, and got to develop some of those work procedures. So that was really cool.
Yeah, explain that to me a little bit exactly on what you're talking about for our audience that might not be familiar with that specific kind of helicopter integration into the utility side.
Yeah, so really working on our higher voltages, mainly our 500 kV transmission line, which is part of the interstate grid system. And it's primarily in a maintenance role, so going up there and just doing minor maintenance, whether it's spacers or dampeners or stuff like that. Back then we did some work off the skid, and we did some platform work. Now it's primarily HEC, but the line stays energized at 500,000 volts. You're in a stainless steel mesh suit, and it's Faraday cage principle, and and you bond onto the transmission line at the same voltage and the same potential, and you energize yourself in the helicopter, and it's the bird on the wire principle.
Yeah.
No path to ground, and it's really cool. A lot of people have probably seen it on the History Channel and stuff like
Totally.
that. But great work procedures. Got a ton of respect for that. We drifted away from skid transfers and skid work and platform work, and went all in on the HEC. And so that's our bread and butter, and of course we had to develop some work procedures with that, with non-conductive ropes, and we were able to come up with a really cool work procedure for changing out insulators to where you don't even have any ground help. Everybody's back at the LZ, and just the efficiency and the speed that those guys can do it, but so safely. So,
for our listeners that might not be familiar with HEC, what is that?
Yeah, human external cargo. Yep. So 133 operations, class Bravo. So you generally have one or two linemen on the end of the rope, and we use it for access, putting them on the towers, putting them on the conductor, and then flying in all their tools and their ladders and their hoist to grounds, and then assisting them with insulator change outs or reconductor jobs and flying in bundle blocks. And it's just what a great tool it is.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I'm really excited to talk more about that, specifically from the pilot side and what you guys are looking at for pilots and training and things. But before we get there, just give me a little bit of background on PG&E. For those who may not be familiar with PG&E, who are you guys? How much area do you cover? And what is the significance PG&E plays in our economy, essentially providing electricity?
Yeah, Pacific Gas and Electric Company started back in the, I think we're well over 100 years old, and shame on me for not knowing the exact dates. But we are the largest gas and electric service provider in California. So we cover, I'll just kind of round it off, call it the Oregon border to the Pacific Ocean to the Nevada line, and then down to the Mojave Desert with our gas system. Our electric system kind of ends at the mountain range that divides us in Southern California, the Grapevine. So that's where our electric system stops. But really big area. You could be flying in the desert, you could be flying on the coast, and you could be flying in the mountains all on the same day.
It's crazy.
So it's huge. If you're not, a lot of people aren't familiar with California, but right up the middle of it's San Joaquin and the Sacramento Valley, huge agricultural areas, almonds, rice, and so lots and lots of agriculture areas we cover too. So
for our listeners that might not be familiar with this type of helicopter operation and how helicopters serve PG&E, give us just a little bit of a rundown on how vital helicopters are to PG&E.
They have become, and they ever increasingly just a huge backbone of our operation. Whether it's patrolling, our gas and electric system, for routine patrols or outages, huge response there. We have a couple special programs that just dedicated to that. Our HEC program for construction and maintenance is huge. We fly over 14,000 hours a year just doing HEC.
That's insane.
So our helicopter ops program in total, we average about 30,000 flight hours a year just doing utility work. And I know for a fact there's no other utility comes close to us.
That's insane. 30,000 hours in a year. 14,000 being just HEC.
Correct.
Strictly.
Correct.
That's insane. I'm not, again, it's not really an industry or sector that I'm super familiar with. I never flew utility. I always kind of say, I had a path, right? It's like the Matrix, right? You have your red or your blue pill. And I think helicopters are very similar to that. You have your utility or you have your non-utility. And for whatever reason, I'm surprised because I was young when I started learning how to fly, 18, 19 years old. I probably should have chosen utility because it seems so much more fun and engaging, HEC style flying, but I went the other route. So admittedly, this is not a sector that I'm super familiar with. So one of the questions I have is I have some clients on this helicopter side that I think contract with PG&E. So you guys have an internal fleet, but then you also contract with other operators?
We do. We have, so we own 4 UH-60 Blackhawks. We contract out the maintenance and operations with that, with one of our partners, PG&E Helicopters, based out of Red Bluff, which that's been a partnership going over 50 years.
That's insane.
And they're just absolutely phenomenal at what they do. And I always say we need to stick to pipes and wires. Are we in the aviation business? Yes, but there's some absolute experts out there in the operations and maintenance.
Sure.
Right? So that's really helped us be successful. Besides PJs, we currently have 11 other, I like to call them partners, contractors, that work for us. At one time we were over 25, and the last few years we've cut it down, kind of changed our strategy, and reduced it down to over half, to where we have the confidence that we have the best operators. We're keeping them busy year round. Mm-hmm. We've also changed our strategy. We want full-time power line utility folks. Historically, especially on the West Coast, a lot of people would go fight fire.
Sure.
Call it June to November, and then they'd call us and be like, hey, we just got released.
We're ready to go.
We want to, and as you know, being a helicopter pilot, especially vertical reference, those skills are so perishable.
Yeah.
And with that change in strategy to where we have guys focusing on and doing power line work 12 months out of the year, and their skills are not perishing, and they're actually getting sharper and sharper. And that, to me, there's a direct correlation with safety, because our incident rates have gone down, right? So that's been huge. And they're staying busy all the time, so the revenue's flowing.
Yeah, it's good.
They're able to buy newer helicopters. Yep. They're able to retain the better pilots. They're able to retain the better mechanics. That's a big draw nowadays too.
Yep.
And so it's just been a win, and we don't lose them, right? I don't like playing second fiddle to Forest Service CAL FIRE.
Sure.
And the power line industry, we have to specialize in it. So that's been a change in strategy, which I think's been really successful for everybody involved. So, we contract out all of our other helicopters, and so during the peak season, with wildfire season, call it June to November, we'll typically have over 50 light ships on exclusive use, so they're ours operationally through the wildfire season. And then we can get up to, we have in the past 2020, 2021 area with wildfires, power outages, stuff like that. We've been over 75 helicopters a day working for us. So it gets really busy.
Yeah, and I've actually been a direct result of that, to be honest, because I've had clients that have had great relationships with PG&E, and as you said, it's enabled them to increase their revenue, increase their operational size, and we've got to help them then acquire new aircraft.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So there's really a trickle-down effect. I mean, you have such a big touch in the industry, right? So you guys are helping employ so many pilots, mechanics, keeping businesses going, and it's pretty cool. So I appreciate that. So keep doing that. When you're looking for a partner, as you call them, contractor, partner, what are you looking for? What makes I'm guessing you've kind of got it down to a little bit of a science of just that gut of it's going to be a good relationship, and what does that look like to you?
Thank you to our sponsor, Vertical Aviation International. Are you ready for the largest vertical aviation show in the world? Verticon, formerly HAI Heli Expo, is coming to Dallas in March. With over 15,000 professionals and 600 companies in attendance, this is an event you don't want to miss. If you're interested in exhibiting, contact sales at verticalavi.org. That's sales at verticalavi.org. See you at Verticon.
It's really, as you and I were talking about earlier on a different subject, in business, it's based off relationships. That's 100%. Where you win and lose.
Yep.
And I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about safety and culture. Well, you can't have that. You can't have that culture, whether it's a just culture or anything. You're not going to have a winning culture if you don't have the relationships and the trust. That's a non-starter. If you don't have that, you're not going to succeed. It can't be this transactional.
Yeah.
And I can go through my phone. I was just visiting with somebody out in the hall. I can go through my phone right now. I've got every DO's phone number and every chief pilot's phone number, and I can probably go through there and tell you I've talked to every single one of them within the last week or two.
Yeah.
And so that to me has been the difference maker. We're looking for really good people that have the same mindset. Or really, the last few years we've kept increasing our standards and the expectations, and we've also standardized our fleet. We don't own them, but I think we're one of the first utilities to say, these are the only makes and models we're going to use.
Yep.
When we first started our department and we were really ramping up to support our public safety power shutoff programs, and we were tasked with going out and getting 65 light helicopters and putting them on exclusive use, I called it the county animal shelter of helicopters. You could look out on the ramp, and there would be every make and model out there,
Sure.
right? From MD 520s to 600s to 920s to Jet Rangers, Long Rangers, 407s, 429s. We had everything.
Sure.
Anything we were patrolling in 500Ds, 530, anything we could get light helicopter and put people in, right? Well, since then we've gotten, I'd like to think we've gotten a little smarter through experience and pain. And we really changed our strategy, too, to where we knew what the right thing to do was, and we weren't going to sit around and wait for the industry, the helicopter contractors, to tell us the right thing to do. So we made a pretty hard stand a couple years ago, and it set some people back on their heels. But we said, hey, no more Jet Rangers, no more Long Rangers. We're not going to patrol in 500s. It needs to be preferably a 407 or a H125 B3. Mm-hmm. We even got rid of the B2s.
Yep.
Has to have air conditioning.
It's huge.
And we told people, hey, you don't have to go buy new helicopters. If you don't want to, cool. But you're not going to work here.
But this is what we need.
This is what we're going to need, and so that's been really cool to see. It was tough at the first, but it's been huge. I have not had any pilots really complain about getting in a 407.
Yeah, no one's going to complain on that.
Even changing that mindset with LiDAR. Primarily, everybody flies LiDAR, Jet Rangers, Long Rangers. Can they do the job? Yeah. Are they the best machine in California? No, because like I said earlier, you could be in the desert or you can be in the Sierra Nevadas the same day.
Yeah, it's insane.
And you're bebopping around in a Jet Ranger with a sensor package on there and an operator, and given your fuel load and the temperature and your DA, maybe you don't take a lunchbox. Maybe you don't take somebody extra, right?
It's very tight.
Maybe you probably don't have air conditioning now, and to me, the standardization, too, of going to the 407s and these more, let's just call them modern aircraft with higher performance margins and higher safety margins, that correlates to safety, too, right? Because pilots aren't getting put into, positions where they have to make a bad decision or they're power limited. So that, and more stable platform. And at the end of the day, they feel better. They're in an air conditioned machine. We had a couple of projects where, we were going to start doing LiDAR in 407s, and of course the cost is a lot different between that and a Jet Ranger, but we're willing to pay that too.
Sure.
We don't go to our operators or our partners and say, hey, I want all 407s, but I still want that Jet Ranger price.
I'm going to pay the Jet Ranger, right?
No, we know what it costs. We know what our philosophy is the gate's got to swing both ways.
Of course.
We want them to be profitable. We need some efficiency. But we're not trying to bleed anybody out, and that's been a huge win-win. You can get back to the LiDAR project. Yeah, did the cost per hour go up? Yeah, but guess what? They finished it.
It's quicker.
They finished it in 50% of what it took.
Yeah, that's crazy. When you talk about LiDAR, so I've been on the receiving end of that decision, actually, because at that point a lot of people were selling the Jet Rangers and the Long Rangers and now getting into 407s, 407GXs. So I got to help with a lot of that. So that was
cool.
Really worked out well for me.
Yeah, cool.
Maybe they were a little bummed at first, but I was happy. So and several of my clients are LiDAR ops, and I got to actually go and recently, about a year ago, see what kind of data they can provide.
Yeah.
It was just incredible. But for our listeners that might not be super familiar, I think by this point everyone's kind of at least heard of LiDAR, and maybe they understand it's kind of aerial mapping and things like that. But when it comes to a utility sense for PG&E, what is LiDAR doing for you guys?
And definitely not my expertise. I'll put that disclaimer out there right now.
We don't need to go deep about.
Yeah.
Hey, can you tell me the mirrers, the sensors, and the lasers? Perfect. Because I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, good. No, it's huge. Big piece of our business, especially on the electric ops side. And then of course veg management, and primarily they're going out and they're looking at the vegetation and the trees, and I've seen some of the reports and the data, and they can just drill down on these trees and tell you how close they are to the line and how much growth they expect.
Isn't that crazy?
And then measuring the conductor height off the ground, and just the imagery and the data it produces is huge. And I looked the other day. I think we had 5 machines flying the other day this time of year. And I was just doing some emails last night over some other LiDAR projects coming up. So, by August, September, I expect us to probably have 7 or 8 LiDAR, IR, Corona type machines out working. Mm-hmm. So it's a big piece of the business. Yeah.
And for our listeners that might not fully understand this idea of LiDAR capturing vegetation coming into the lines, the client that I got to see was pretty cool. I mean, you could, again, I know nothing about any of it, to be honest, but I could look at the screen and I could be like, oh, green, yellow, red. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then they could even forecast it out. Oh, this is this type of tree.
Oh, yeah.
And it's over the next 4 years, it's going to grow this much out. So, yeah. But for our listeners that might not understand why that's important for you guys to know, just explain that.
Well, especially in California, it's huge with us, right? With the wildfire, our wildfire predicaments, and some of our past history. All of the utilities have suffered some pretty catastrophic events with wildfires.
Sure.
PG&E primarily in 2018 to 2021 time range. Southern California, just went through some horrible fires here.
Really bad.
In January. Unfortunately, it's a way of life in California nowadays. And so, wildfire prevention is huge, and that's a big focus of PG&E because we do not want to be the ignition source of any fires. So definitely dealing with the vegetation, making sure everything's trimmed back away from our power lines, and then hardening our system, going to tree covered wire. There's a big undergrounding push to move a lot of the distribution lines to underground, and so that is a huge piece of our work is wildfire prevention and mitigation, and whether it's maintenance and construction or patrols and compliance, doing veg patrols, LiDAR, just a huge focus of ours, and it's not going to go away, for any of the utilities in California. And actually, you're starting to see it drift east, right?
Sure.
I know I've met with some other utilities, Idaho, even out to Texas. They've been dealing with some fires, a little different, not so much timber, but those grass fires, out in West Texas take off and can be catastrophic too.
It's a big deal.
And I know, I've got some friends and networking all the way out to Louisiana, and they're dealing with wildfires. I know the Forest Service had a couple machines out there.
Yep. They're fighting fire in New York.
Well, yeah, the Hamptons the other day. So it's a real deal, with drought and bug infestations, and then the urban interface keeps moving. Everybody wants to live out in the woods.
Yep.
So it's always going to be a focus.
Yeah, it makes sense. You had mentioned earlier that at one point there were 75. Now it's around 50 partners flying between kind of the busy fire season months. What is their direct role during the fire season? What are you using the helicopters for, and how are they helping mitigate the wildfire risk?
So we have primarily it's 2 programs. We have one called Enhanced Powerline Safety Settings. Generally starts in April and goes all the way. It's supposed to end in November, 1st of November, depending on when the rain comes. As you've seen, we just, fire season didn't end. We were fighting fire in January this year to our neighbors to the south and a little bit of our system. So Enhanced Powerline Safety Settings, they turn down the settings on the distribution and transmission lines to where when it sees a fault, whether it's a tree branch or wires slapping together or whatever wire hits the ground, any kind of fault, it instantaneously de-energizes that line. It will not test back into itself. Normally it'll test back into itself. Well, you don't want it to test back into itself in a high fire threat area because you could be the ignition source.
Sure.
So that line goes de-energized, customers are out. So with the EPSS program, we have 16 light helicopters strategically based around our service territory. They're pre-flighted every morning, ready to go. and they're supposed to launch within 30 minutes of a dispatch to go pick up a patrolman and go respond to that outage and hopefully patrol it, find the cause. Hopefully we can fix it and re-energize it. So that's been a really successful program. So those are, primarily 407s. There's a couple B3Es tucked in there, a couple 429s also. So that runs. Those ships don't do anything else. They're just, they're almost like a fire ship or a med ship just sitting there waiting for a call. So that's been really successful because we can't have them out doing HEC or other work and expect them to bail. You can't leave guys on the towers, right? So those are dedicated. That's been really successful. And then the other program we have is called our PSPS. It's Public Safety Power Shutoff. And the same thing in the height of fire season. There's a certain recipe with our electric ops folks and our weather folks, and we have such a strong meteorology department, and of course our electric ops team is just absolutely phenomenal. What they do, and they go out and stronger, and the technology with the satellites and the system that they've continually evolves out there with protection is. When you get very high temperatures, when you get into red flag days with fire danger, and then when we start dealing with the north winds, and the fire danger goes tremendously high, we will actually proactively de-energize power lines until those conditions go away, because we do not want to start a fire.
Yeah.
So when we do that, and it can be widespread or it can be really condensed into certain areas, and they'll start shutting off certain portions of circuits, and we've gotten better as a company to where the focus narrows way down, and they've really tried to minimize the impact to our customers, but we will still proactively shut off those power lines until the conditions get better. Well, to re-energize those lines, we have to go patrol every foot of it.
Really?
And so, right, the fastest and usually the best way is with a helicopter, and so that's why we have another 34 light helicopters on EU contract at our disposal to support that. When we first started the program, we were at 65. We've gotten, I like to think we've gotten a little bit better, and the size of our PSPS events have gotten smaller with the help of our grid and a lot of devices out there. But we will launch those helicopters with our patrolmen to go patrol those areas. And so even last year, I think one day we had 30 ships up in the air supporting that. So the beauty with those ships is we can pretty much predict when we're going to have a public safety power shut off. We generally have, with our meteorology department, we'll have like 96 hours warning.
Okay.
So those ships are not just sitting around. We use them for all of our regular work.
Okay.
They're out doing HEC. They're out doing patrols. They're out doing 133 ops, just setting poles or slinging concrete or whatever we need to do at PG&E, supporting our hydro crews up in the Sierras. But when we have a PSPS event, we bring them all back.
Centralize it.
And now we know we have a dedicated fleet, because with wildfire season, what we learned is we're competing with CAL FIRE, we're competing with Forest Service, we're competing with other utilities, we're competing with all these huge transmission grid projects across the United States. And so we have to have some kind of insurance policy that we're going to have the helicopters available.
Of course.
The right helicopters with the right pilots, right? Because you can't run down to the Vegas Strip and tell a tour operator, hey, I need 6 helicopters to help me for a month.
Yeah,
that doesn't work.
It's not going to work that way.
No. And that's been a learning process, too, with some of our executives, right? You can't just go run out and find power line helicopter pilots.
That's an interesting point. There's probably obviously a lot of people within the organization that don't fully understand helicopters, right? It's a very big organization. What is your role with them in helping educate them on why you need these helicopters at your disposal at a snap of finger?
Yeah, that's a really cool part of my job, is I'm kind of like the liaison between the helicopter world and the electrical, or call it utility industry, and a lot of our executives, or even our internal business partners, whether it's electric ops or hydro or gas department, telecom, anybody we would deal with. And so they look at us to be the aviation experts. And so we have to know enough about aviation. We have to know enough about our core business. Do I know everything about hydro? No, but I got some great people on my team that do.
Yeah.
Right. And the same with electric ops. I've got a lineman background. I got some real pipe hitters on my team that are former linemen. And so we have to be the aviation experts, and educate. And a lot of times, it goes the other way around. We have to explain stuff to our operators about why we're doing certain things at the utility and what the expectations are and why we need the support. So it's really cool.
Yeah.
And then, getting the interface with our executives, I've got a great boss that I report to. He's a helicopter guy, Army and Coast Guard.
That's good.
Pilot, so just a ton of great experience there. And so he's a huge help, being a conduit of information and explaining the why to our executives. And we have a great relationship and a whole lot of support.
Sure.
So that's been a huge
part of our
success.
Yeah, I feel like that's sometimes one of the hardest things in helicopter operations. Even helicopter operators will sometimes have a hard time articulating why they need to spend money here or there to, say, the accounting department or whatnot. And that brings me to another, hot topic, which is, of course, safety, right? And safety is not always super affordable, to be honest, right? It's you have to make some initiatives. You got to spend some money. I think the alternative is actually way worse. But I'm guessing since you've been around helicopters and helicopter utilities for a long time, you have seen a large shift in safety within this specific mission set.
Yeah.
So what are some of the biggest changes from when you started to now? And then I have a secondary question of, you're working with all these different partners, contractors. How do you align on making sure that they're also to your safety standard in creating that just culture?
Thank you to our sponsor, Instrom Helicopter Corporation. Instrom Helicopter Corporation is proud to announce the new 480B Elite, fully loaded with all the top-of-the-line features, including the Garmin G500H, electric AC, Genesis 3-axis autopilot, exclusive paint and interior, and more. Q3 delivery dates are available, but opportunities are limited. Secure your spot at instromhelicopter.com.
It's been a work in progress. Like I said, we started the department in 2012, and there was, 2 or 3 of us when it first started, with just some ideas on a whiteboard, and whole lot of smart people in the background helping us, and it's evolved, to where aviation services at PG&E, it's well over 50 or 60 people now, right, with a really strong drone department and a fixed wing department. But really just making those decisions like I talked about earlier, standardizing our fleet, raising our expectations, raising our training requirements, raising our, continuing the refining and our SOPs. If it doesn't work, let's fix it, right? But it still has to be consumable, and it has to work for the guys in the field, right? Sure. One thing, and I tell my guys all the time, we're always working on our manuals, and it seems like they're always needed to be updated. I don't ever want to write a rule that we know they're going to have to break, right? Does there need to be some operational flexibility in there? Yeah,
of course.
There absolutely does, whether it's a lineman or a line pilot. We can't make everything so black and white that they just get paralyzed out there. We have to trust their judgment and their training too. So, standardizing the fleet, that was a huge push. Our lineman training, whether it's HEC or our patrolman training, we've continually enhanced that. The wire environment training is a mandatory for all of our patrollers. It's mandatory for all of our pilots. That's a non-starter if you don't have that.
Of course.
Right? And I think the industry has seen huge benefits across that, and that continues to evolve, and we're always trying to update that too. We don't want stagnant training, right? Our standards keep raising. One thing that we do, and, probably I was just sharing this with one of my friends out in the hallway. I think probably the biggest compliment we've ever gotten was from a couple of our operators. And they said, man, you guys, out of all the utilities in the U.S., you guys have the highest standards, right, to meet and the biggest expectations. But we actually enjoy working for you the most.
Yeah. Because
they know what to expect. The standards are generally fairly clear. We do have, I do believe, we have a really good culture, and it's continually evolving. So that was a huge compliment. So, evolving our training, refining our fleet, and you got to make that investment, I was at the UPAC meeting the other day, Utility Patrol and Construction, through the association. Somehow I don't know if I stepped forward or was too slow, but I ended up being the chairman this year. So I was talking to the group here just at our meeting on Tuesday, and we had a great safety presentation from Quanta Aviation about ERP, emergency response plans, drills, and we were really talking about that. And then I shared some stats from the USHST, the helicopter safety team,
Sure.
and it was really cool to see that the UPAC, the utility group, wasn't even in the reportable incident and accidents.
That's awesome.
Right? So just, giving everybody in there kudos.
Yeah.
That is so awesome to see us not even mentioned in there.
Yeah, and it's let's not toil around. I mean, it's a very intense mission.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, you are flying in wire environment, you're flying in different locations, high and hot. There's so many factors.
Absolutely.
And so to not even be mentioned, I mean, that's incredible. Kudos to you guys. That's
yeah, well, it's and kudos to the association and the UPAC committee,
to the industry.
That's been a big focus. I've been fortunate to be part of the UPAC for probably I think I'm going on 15 years, but to see that evolve and just, we were at that committee the other day, and I'm standing out there looking at the room, and it's intimidating because there's so much knowledge and experience in there. I mean, the best of the best are in that room, in the power line world and on the helicopter side. And then even, it's great to see all the utility. We're getting more and more utilities in there, and they're probably sick of me bugging them, but that's what it's going to take to increase the safety of our industry, is that collective engagement.
We're all in it together.
Absolutely.
Right?
I was listening to a podcast this morning. It was a Jocko podcast, and he was talking about the leadership book by General Hal Moore, and they were talking about a part to where, and it really resonated with me. Our families are relying on us to know our business and our jobs.
Yep.
Whether it's my family or the folks that are working with me, their families are relying on us to be the best at our jobs.
Yeah.
And so they come home every day.
It's true.
And, and unfortunately in my career, I've seen the bad days. I've been part of the bad days. I've been out there and picked up helicopter pieces.
Yeah.
And probably the worst day of my career in a leadership role is I saw a pilot's family get notified by the sheriff that he wasn't coming home that day.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that keeps me awake at night, and it's burning my brain for forever.
Yeah.
And it's really what it drives me, and because I don't ever want to see that or be a part of it ever again. It's horrific.
This is serious business.
Yeah.
It really is, and we talk about this on the show often of that. If you're in this industry long enough, you can see really the dark side.
Bro.
And unfortunately, even in my about 18 years of being in aviation, I think I've known at least 10 different people that have been in accidents that ended up not surviving.
Yep.
And I know more people that have been in accidents, and thank God they've survived. But, helicopters are such a small margin. And oftentimes I feel like when you look at it from a whole, when I look at whether it's my friends in accidents or just going through and looking at the NTSB and trying to consume and figure out how I can not repeat, it seems that there's a lot of mission pressure that leads to it. It's a lot of mismanagement from companies. Even some of my really good friends made some very questionable decisions, and I don't know if that's because they had a mission pressure from the top or whatever it may be. So I think it's incredible never to forget the magnitude, because you're right. There's such a ripple effect, right? If you have one helicopter accident and say there's 3 or 4 people in that aircraft, how many people does that affect? It could be in the hundreds.
And some people just maybe they don't realize it or they don't want to face the fact how fast it can go so bad.
Yep.
Right? Especially if you have a wire strike.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to end well.
Yeah.
Or, there's a multitude of ways. And, the helicopter world, it's got its risk. And then you introduced power lines and linemen.
Yeah.
And you introduced those two personalities, right? Helicopter pilots and linemen are some of the most strongest A-type personalities I've ever met in my life. Sure. and they all have a can-do attitude. And the worst thing, especially power line pilots, their hardest thing is to say no.
Of course.
Right? They want to get the job done. They don't want to let the crew down. But sometimes saying no
is the best.
Hey, I'm not the guy, or hey, can we do it another way? And so that's been a big push too. We actually, going back to the safety piece, is one thing we do that's pretty unique at PG&E is every pilot that's going to come on board for any of our operators, they have to submit all their paperwork, and we make sure they meet the minimums and the training requirements and all that stuff. But then we sit down with them, it's generally me, and it, for lack of a better term, interview them, and we sit down for an hour and a half.
Wow.
And get to know them.
Yeah.
And have a conversation, and then I want them to hear and see the expectations from us coming straight from us.
Yeah, from you directly.
And it's not, right? I don't want it to be safety slogans on the wall. I want them to see, I want every pilot to remember, seeing the whites of my eyes, or one of my guys. A lot of times, sometimes my schedule doesn't allow it, but, I have some of my guys that work for me do it, but they have a personal one-on-one meeting with all of us, and we go over the expectations. We go over the stuff, the mousetraps to look out for that have bitten us and continually bite us, and we talk about the culture and the speak up, and don't be afraid to say no. And we're here to support you. We would rather you say no, I can't do it, or I'm not the guy, than make it a bad decision, because that customer pressure. That one thing that's been great is that video, that 56 seconds to live, right? Huge impact.
Yeah, it's
and
powerful.
It wasn't even based on the power line world, but I take it.
Yeah.
And I always ask every pilot, you ever watch that? Because what I don't want them to be that poor pilot sitting there looking at the weather, and they're going, oh my God, I don't want PG&E to be the customer, forcing them to make a bad decision.
Of course.
Hey, guess what? If it's no good, don't launch.
Yeah, don't go.
And if you're en route and it gets bad, land.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Will the customer survive? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I care if that pole gets set? Probably not. We could set it tomorrow. Do I care if
everything can wait?
Do I care if that clearance runs over? Not really. I talk about survivability. Will our customers survive a power outage? Generally, especially in California.
Yeah.
Contrary to what they may think, right?
I mean, the power out sucks, but
it sucks.
But
generally, they're going to survive. Is a pilot going to survive if he punches in? Maybe not. Is he going to survive if we have a wire strike? Probably not.
Yeah.
So that's what I focus on.
The alternative is so much more catastrophic.
And it's been great with Chris Gordney, my director, being a Coast Guard guy.
Yeah.
And because I always talk about, hey, we're not going out. People aren't going to drown if we don't show up.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Nobody's shooting at us.
Yeah.
We're a gas and electric company, and we don't have all these special permissions to be high speed, and we can do it. We can do it right. There's always time to make a good decision.
Well, I think industry-wide, we've worked so hard at getting pilots, and more specifically getting operators to be okay with no.
Yeah.
And, producer Zach and I, we flew air medical. That was my last full-time gig. And I got to say, I worked for a company, a very large company, that 100% supported pilots saying no. There was never any question. If the pilot didn't want to go because of weather or because of this or that, there's no recourse, right? And the missions still got done when they could get done. And the accidents within that sector have been dramatically decreased. And I think as an industry, whether it's utility, air medical, tours, whatever it is, operators supporting no. And actually, it's probably better to say that operators supporting good pilot decisions.
Absolutely.
And allowing that professional to make that decision and then supporting it. And so I'd love to hear that you guys are in that same boat.
Well, and we learned from the EMS world, right?
Yeah.
Because I tell all the pilots, as long as you can articulate your decision, you're good to go, man.
Yeah.
Like, don't just throw a safety card out there and go, oh, it's not safe, right?
Of course.
I got a freaking, I got a game to get to.
Yeah, if it's
As long as
severe
you can
clear out.
articulate your decision, man, we'll back you till the cows come home.
Yeah.
And we learned from the EMS world, right? Because we tell all of our operators, and I tell, we have a great, phenomenal team of dispatchers and schedulers that handle all this daily stuff. But we also tell them, like, if a pilot says no, we're not going to go shopping around for a yes.
Yeah, of course.
And we learned that from the EMS world,
Yeah.
right? Unfortunately. But, that's where you got to pay attention to the other parts of the helicopter industry, too, because there's so much great great stuff to learn from there. So yeah, if they call and say, "No, we can't get there because the weather no good," we're not going to call around and go, "Hey, those guys won't go do it. You think you can scud run this for us?"
Yeah, no helicopter shopping.
No
crew shopping. Not. Yeah, it's so important. The other thing that you've been talking about, and I'm curious, so I actually got to do one wire environment class. Again, I've never really, I flew air medical, and actually we talked extensively during our in-doc about flying in the wire environment, because air medical, you land on a highway, road, you're in that environment. But I got to do one combined, and it was with Portland, in Portland, so whatever the Portland utility is, but it was with linemen and pilots together. And one of the things in the air medical world was it kind of went from this idea of self-loading baggage for your crew, for your nurse and paramedic, to actually integrating them as a vital member of the helicopter crew and safety. Talk to me about that, on how that's also transitioned for linemen.
Absolutely.
And what is a lineman's responsibility when they're riding in that helicopter?
Yeah, so we, through experience and pains of our own and across the industry, and we're really fortunate. We've got some great people on our staff too that come from the EMS world. Our manager of scheduling and dispatch, she came from that world. Our SMS manager, he's an EMS pilot.
Yeah.
So we're fortunate to have them and their experiences. But years ago we started changing our attitude about the expectations of our patrolmen. Whether you're going out and doing electric or hydro or whatever, you're not just up there to go look at the power lines. You're now an essential crew member.
Yep.
You're a crew member of that helicopter, right? Are you going to rely on that pilot to see everything? No, you better not, right? I trust him. Do I trust him with my life 100%? Probably not.
You can't.
No. And so we've enhanced the training with the wire environment and really the CRM. That's been a huge piece of scanning. You need to be calling stuff out. You need to be speaking simply, clear, and concise, and through the wire environment trainings, Bob Fierce has been teaching that for decades, and that's evolved, and it's been great to see, so much of the industry across the U.S. adopting that as a requirement, and I do think it saved lives, but really enhancing our expectations of our patrollers. They have to go through wire environment class, right? But then they have to go do some OJT flights, and then they have to go do a check ride and get checked off by an evaluator, because just because you go sit in an 8-hour class doesn't mean you're ready to go strap on a helicopter and do a power line patrol at less than 200 feet, right? And then also explaining stuff to them. Like, do we expect them to run a performance chart on a helicopter? No, but we're also trying to explain the HV curve and maybe why we can't hover down there. And then we actually put a hard deck on our patrol altitude this last year, which didn't go over really great, but the pilots love it. And you know what? It's dramatically reduced our exposure and our customer complaints too.
Yeah.
And trying to fly friendly, but also safer, and keeping that helicopter,
of course, be a little bit
higher and faster until we absolutely need to. And if they need to go down and look something, they do a quick recon scan, and then they go down there before, like I tell them, before you jump into the alligator's mouth.
Know what you're getting into.
Absolutely. Instead of, you're right, because, we used to go patrol power lines at less than 100 feet and just be scud running the whole thing. And, when you start getting customer complaints about all their patio furniture blown over, and it's true, it's like, man, what are we doing? One of my guys told me, he used to be a patrolman. He's like, man, we were doing a distribution one time, and we were so low, we probably should have had turn signals on the helicopter, and so
that's not good.
Continuing to evolve in that and doing it for the right reasons, and going back to your question earlier about the price of safety and stuff. I challenged the whole UPAC committee the other day, because the utilities are going to keep increasing their standards, their audits, everything. Mm-hmm. And I told all the operators in there, and even the utilities, I said, hey, everybody's always worried about how much it's going to cost to do this, how much it's going to cost to do that. Let's turn that around. How much is it going to cost not to do it?
Yeah.
How much business are you going to lose? Right?
Yeah.
How much does the accident cost?
Yeah.
So what's the price of inaction?
Yeah, exactly. And I think long term the price of inaction is much higher.
Oh yeah.
It's just human nature to not always recognize the long term impact everyone's always looking for the short term, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Especially
but I think
in today's world.
But I think as an industry, that's really changed, and not just with PG&E, but so many different big operators. There's just that better understanding. Some of the other safety enhancements, obviously, talked about flying higher, so having a deck. Are you guys also utilizing like some of the cameras that now are available for helicopters for line inspections?
We're dabbling in that. I wouldn't say we're actually doing it. We're I think some of the other utilities our friends at Duke and TVA are
big on it.
Really pushing that a lot harder than we are. And I talk to them guys a lot, and I like to keep a pulse on what they're doing because they're really doing some great stuff. Are we going to get there eventually? Yeah, I think so. To where, especially in really dense urban areas, we can fly higher.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully the customers don't notice us. We're at a safer altitude, and even, especially like San Francisco Bay Area and stuff, where you don't have a lot of options. If you need to make an emergency landing, maybe that's where we go to Twins, right?
Yeah.
Is that the silver bullet? No, it's not, but it'll help.
Sure.
So, yeah, we're definitely looking at that because if we can go up and do a patrol and take a look at stuff at 700, 800 feet versus being at less than 200 in that kind of environment, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a big deal, right? That's significant. I had Ascent Aerosystems on the podcast yesterday. They're a drone company that was actually acquired by Robinson last year. And one of the things that they were targeting was using drones for utility.
Yep.
What is your stance on that? And where do you think the industry is going? Do you think that drones will play a fairly large role in utility?
They already do.
We know you love helicopters. That's why you're here. But are you ready to make it a career? Hillsboro Heli Academy has been making dreams of flying helicopters come true since 1980. Visit us at flyhaa.com and dream big.
Right. To me, it's the next .com boom. It already is. We actually have a really, really robust UAS department. It falls under aviation services. We have a manager. He's actually here too. And PG&E's already heavily invested in the drones. Right now, we generally have, I think yesterday we had over 70 drones out flying.
Wow.
Doing inspections and mostly camera work, taking a lot of pictures, and we have a line pulling device where we'll use a drone in an urban area to pull in a small rope.
Crazy.
Where we can't use a helicopter.
Sure.
It's been a great tool because we've had jobs where we're doing a reconductor and we need to pull a new wire and we get into a really densely populated area, and I'm not going to go evacuate 20,000 people to come buzzing through there with a 530, right? Side pulling. So what we did is we used this new drone line pulling device. We pulled in those 7 spans with the drone, and once we were out of that area and back to where it made more sense to have a 530 out there side pulling, we went right back to it. So they're really, I look at them as another tool in the toolbox. I can't tell you I've always been like that, right? I'm a helicopter guy,
of course,
by trade, so I'm like, get those things out of here. But now it's really, they're not going away.
They're not going away.
And they do provide some really great solutions. PG&E is really heavily invested in the beyond visual line of sight.
Yep, of course.
We've invested in these. They call them drone in a box, where they're remote, and we have a remote operating center to where we have drone pilots 200 miles away launching these things from a substation, and they're flying them around in the substation looking for a fault. Right?
Yeah,
they're looking at using them for corporate security functions, for patrolling substations and stuff like that. Of course, we're pushing to get into the bigger drones they got longer legs and can stay up longer and higher altitudes, and so that's and we're not the only utility. I know Duke and Southern Company and you name them, all the big, they're all into it. It's definitely a part of the future, and is it going to take over a little bit of the helicopter work? Absolutely,
of course.
But if you look at the images that they send a drone out to go look at a 115 kV tower and look at the insulators and all the hardware, that thing's taking 300 pictures from every angle.
Yeah.
When you're doing a helicopter, you're getting a downward shot, maybe a horizontal here and there, but the images are tremendous.
Yeah, the quality is, I mean, just the technology that they're able to pack in. I mean, the drone that we were looking at yesterday was this new HeliCASTS drone. It was 250 grams or something like that, which is not big.
Yeah.
But the power and the technology, I mean, this thing could connect with other drones.
Yeah.
This idea of swarm technology where they can
It's just going to
come
keep
together.
evolving and evolving, you know. And
But I think it's synergy. I think that for a long time, helicopter guys like you and I had this fear of they're going to take our job, right?
Yeah.
And again, there's going to be some jobs that could be eliminated, go fully drone. I mean, look, now there's helicopters at the show here that are flying themselves as well, so that's even a crazier thought. But I think that there's a good synergy. I think that helicopters and drones can actually long-term, work together.
I think they're going to complement each other.
I think so. I think it's so I don't know. So against, I think the new drone is the autonomy. So anything that's fully autonomous, or some of the eVTOL things that we're seeing. So, but we're kind of coming up on our time, which is crazy.
Quick.
I know, right? Just like that, we're actually coming up on an hour, and it's just super fun to be able to connect. Again, this is an industry that I'm not super familiar with, and in an industry that it's cool to learn about. And I know that MHM Publishing is writing some articles on you guys.
Yeah,
and so I'm just excited. We'll finish with this. What is the impact of being more public and coming on podcasts and having vertical published stories? What does that do for you guys as an organization?
You know, it's if you get to know me, I'm it's not my nature to be on podcast or in front of cameras.
Well, you're killing it.
Or even be on the UPAC in front of everybody. I told everybody, I go, man, this is a big room, and it's even bigger and scarier standing up here looking at you. But I've really been pushing myself and my team to step up and be more leaders of the industry, whether it's at PG&E or in the UPAC committee, because I think that's a big focus in the helicopter industry, and especially the power line world, utility world, is grooming leadership and developing leaders. And I think, and I've talked to the UPAC committee about it. I've talked to all of our contractors about it. And that's what's really cool, too, is that's a big focus of ours is leadership development. Mm-hmm. Because, right, you take a guy who's a ace of the base pilot, and all of a sudden you make him a chief pilot, and he has no leadership skills.
Doesn't always work out well.
He's not going to succeed.
Yeah.
And same in mine, right? I can't take one of my guys and all of a sudden, hey, cool, now you're the manager and you're in charge of all these people. And if he has no development, he's going to fall flat on his face, you know. And I've been really fortunate to work under some great leadership, and I'm such a huge fan and a student of it too. Like I just have this thirst and this passion for leadership and leadership development. So we're always reading. Like I can tell you right now, us and some of our helicopter operators, we actually have a little book club, and we're sending each other books and podcasts, and once you see them take off and start running with it too, and you start seeing the development, not just in their DOs and their chief pilots, when you see the line pilots and understanding that they are a leader, even if you're out by yourself, you're in a leadership position.
100%.
If you've got, a crew of 40 linemen working with you, you're in a leadership position because you're the PIC. So that's been really huge, and it's been really cool with the UPAC and just to get our voice and try to share what we're doing and to watch some people, say, yeah, we're on board too. And I think it's just been a great thing to see evolve through the industry. And that's really part of the reason I volunteered to take on some of the leadership stuff at the UPAC, because I want to see it spread across the U.S., right? Because to me, it directly correlates with safety. Yeah. I don't want to see another pilot or another lineman obituary.
Of course.
And whatever we can do in this industry to prevent that horrible day, because if I see a line pilot or lineman die in Kansas or Pennsylvania, we're all from the same cloth.
Yeah,
we're just wearing different hard hats.
It's the same. It's the same.
And if there's something, I told you, we had a conversation at UPAC the other day, and I reminded them, look, safety is not proprietary. It's not proprietary. If there's something we can do and share to prevent a fatality in California or, Maine, I don't care.
I think it's one of the best lines I've had in the podcast is safety is not a proprietary deal.
No.
And I think as an industry, and whether it's a subsector of the industry or just as an industry as a whole, I think that we all have a responsibility to share how we can all collectively be safer. And I think by you coming on a podcast and you guys writing articles with Verticon and becoming more public, you being part of UPAC, and putting yourself out there, because I agree, standing up in front of a room, especially with really educated, smart people, is not an easy thing to do. I'm sure
way more experience and knowledge in that room than me. I definitely wasn't me, and it's intimidating, you know.
I'm sure there's a reason you're the chair, though, right? So I always have to remind myself that, because I've been in similar situations. Like, well, I guess there's a reason. But Pete, thank you so much for sharing your insight.
This was great. It was fun.
This is incredible. You look great, by the way. I love the jacket, the square buttons. So very well dressed, great haircut, of course. And it's just been so much fun. So please stay in touch. Thank you so much for the swag as well. I'll proudly wear this.
You guys got an open invitation anytime you guys want to come out in California and hang out with us and see the operations. We'd love to have you out. We're always willing to share. You know, we have a kind of open door with all the utilities if they want to come benchmark, and I know they get tired of me bugging them because I love to go see what they're doing. If they're doing stuff right, like, we're not afraid to copy and paste.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, I would love the opportunity. Yeah. You guys also, you don't mess around. This is a Richardson, so these are top of the.
You know what?
These are the top of the line.
I am a hat
trucker
snob.
hat. And if you're not familiar with Richardson, I have of course no homage to them, but these are good hats. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
With my hairdo, I'm definitely a hat snob, and I will not, I will not give out a hat that I will not proudly wear myself. So we don't spare much cost on our hats either. So
I love that. Well, hey, Pete, thanks so much for joining. And to our listeners, thank you so much. It's because you guys listen that I get to have awesome conversations with guys like Pete. And I love to hear that the industry as a whole, whether it's in the utility world, the aeromedical world, whatever it is coming together for a common purpose. I think that we have to make a sticker that says safety is not proprietary. I think that's one of the best lines that I've ever heard on this. So I
didn't make it. I stole it from somebody
else.
That's
fine. Hey, look, you said it here, so I'm giving you credit because you at least shared it with me. To MHM Publishing and, of course, the Vertical family of HeliCASTS, Hangar Z, Real Rescue, Vertical MRO, and now the Valor podcast. We're just so grateful. Thank you for listening to another Helicopter podcast.
Thank you to our sponsor, Vertical Aviation International. Are you ready for the largest vertical aviation show in the world? Verticon, formerly HAI HeliExpo, is coming to Dallas in March. With over 15,000 professionals and 600 companies in attendance, this is an event you don't want to miss. If you're interested in exhibiting, contact sales at verticalavi.org. That's sales at verticalavi.org. See you at Verticon. Thank you to our sponsor, Instrom Helicopter Corporation. Instrom Helicopter Corporation is proud to announce the new 480B Elite, fully loaded with all the top-of-the-line features, including the Garmin G500H, electric AC, Genesis 3-axis autopilot, exclusive paint and interior, and more. Q3 delivery dates are available, but opportunities are limited. Secure your spot at instromhelicopter.com.
We know you love helicopters. That's why you're here. But are you ready to make it a career? Hillsboro Heli Academy has been making dreams of flying helicopters come true since 1980. Visit us at flyhaa.com and dream big.